You may remember there was some controversy in the early days of this government when we said, when we conducted relationships with China or any other country, there were really three elements to that. There were not just economic interests, there were also fundamental human values, Canadian values, and also our security interests. And in all of those things, we insist that all of those things be on the table in this and any other relationship, and that's the basis on which we have relationships.
That's Prime Minister Stephen Harper as he wraps up a whirlwind trip to China. $2.5 billion worth of deals were signed in Beijing over the weekend. Harper says he also brought up some thorny issues, including human rights, concerns over spying, and security. Can the trip really be called a success? The other element here, and keep your eye on this one, Stephen Harper is leaving just as the APEC summit is beginning, where a big free trade deal, they call it the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, has and will continue to come up. What is the status of that agreement? Joining me now in Toronto is the Parliamentary Secretary to the International Trade Minister, Erin O'Toole. With him is the Liberal International Trade critic, Chrystia Freeland. In Rimouski, Quebec, Guy Caron, the NDP's Deputy International Trade critic. Good to see all of you here. Mr. O'Toole, let me start with you. More than $2 billion worth of deals signed this past weekend in Beijing, having to do with everything from currency to blueberries. One of the purposes, obviously, was to reanimate trade, and there's some tension around espionage and surveillance issues. When will Canadians actually start seeing the effects of these agreements, specifically the reciprocal currency deal?
I think very quickly. It's our intention, Evan, to see that very quickly. Trade's been going up with China. We also have a very mature relationship with them where we're in dialogue on a whole range of issues. You know, some like trade very positive, others that have some tension, but that's a complex and mature relationship that we're advancing with balance. But this trip has been focused on a range of industries. You talked about a number of them, but particularly we're promoting small and medium-sized businesses to look at China as an export opportunity as they grow into the largest economy in the world, and their middle class is emerging, and they're demanding high-quality goods and food like that from Canada. So we're very bullish on continuing to grow the relationship. We opened new offices, so it was a very good trip, and it's good to see the Prime Minister will be back for Remembrance Day tomorrow. All
right, Chrystia Freeland, while we're in Toronto, let me stay with you. Are you satisfied with what the Prime Minister, the list of agreements he came back with?
I think that it's great that Canada is pushing its relationship with China. What we need to be thinking about now is how much more we could have done if we had been pursuing this aggressively for the past 8 years. You know, as Erin says, China is an essential player in the world economy, soon will be the largest economy in the world with a growing middle class. And my only reflection today is, you know, just think of those 8 lost years. We should have been pushing much harder on our economic relationship with China. That's what our middle class needs.
All right, and let me get your take on this particular trip and what was accomplished, Guy Caron.
Well, our trading relationship with China is actually very important, and as Chrystia said, we used to be in an on-again, off-again relationship with China. So we see it as positive that we are in on-again mode right now. If we're looking at one specific issue that we're actually glad to see is the UN Trading Hub. We feel that it's a good initiative to actually facilitate trade and investment rather than having to get through the dealings with American currency. Now we'll be able to actually have a direct access to the China marketplace. So in that sense, it's positive. Once again, we know that in the first 3 years, there was no intent of developing that relationship. Now the intent is there, and we welcome it.
Well, this is obviously there are lots of concerns about human rights, and the Prime Minister says he mentioned human rights, and that's always a very serious issue given the situation in places like Tibet and all through China, Hong Kong particularly right now. But trade was on the top of the agenda. Mr. O'Toole, any progress, and we'll get to the other part of this, the APEC, any progress on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that free trade deal?
Well, Canada's at the table, Evan, as we should be. You know, when you're looking at talks that represent almost 800 million consumers, and Canada as a Pacific nation needs to also be there. We're at the table. But I think there's a lot of expectation about TPP, but until the U.S. president has authority to sort of move quickly on trade, I don't think we're going to get a conclusion to those negotiations as fast as some people might think.
Did you get pressure on things like supply management? Is that become the sticking point on poultry and dairy, where they want Canada to get rid of those protectionist barriers, and Canada saying no? Can you give us an idea on what happens there, Mr. O'Toole?
Well, Canada is at the table, and we're willing to look at an ambitious agreement. But we always go into all of these negotiations trying to get a win for all sectors of the Canadian economy. If you look at our track record, Evan, both the U.S. free trade and the new European deal, we've been able to maintain the essential pillars of supply management through those big negotiated wins. That's how we go into everything. But the more countries you include, and in this case with Asia, some different approaches to intellectual property, a whole range of things, makes it even more complex at the negotiation table. But we're there for a win for all Canadian sectors.
Christian Freeland, what are your concerns going forward on those other deals?
Well, look, I think TPP, you're right to ask about it. That is the essential deal on the table right now. That's going to be 40% of the world's economy. Canada can't afford to be left behind. And I think there's a real reason to be concerned there. We were late coming into TPP, and that meant we entered the negotiations at a disadvantage. We're hearing a lot, even now publicly, from some of our main trading partners criticizing the Canadian position, accusing the Canadians of stonewalling and foot dragging. And, you know, I think that we really need to come to the table and be very aggressive on this, because post the U.S. midterms, I think it's quite likely you're going to see a real push from the U.S. We've heard from President Obama that trade is one of the areas he really wants to make progress on. Canada can't afford to be left out of TPP, and there are really some worrying comments we're hearing from our main partners that they don't feel Canada is really playing a role in the talks.
Okay, but what
we
do you
want us to do the deal.
Get specific. I mean, is it supply management that's a sticking point? Where are you on this?
Well, the talks have been conducted in a lot of secrecy, so, you know, we don't really know what's happening there. I would certainly say that for a Liberal government, doing this deal, getting it done, would be a real priority. I think we can't afford to be left out of it.
Well, Evan, in their leadership, of course, the subject of abandoning a supply management came up in the Liberal leadership race. It seems that's the way they're going. We go into every negotiation trying to get a win, and agriculture is a critical sector of our economy, and the Conservative government stands clearly behind farming families, and we approach it. That's why you can't rush things, despite what Christian
But you know
might
the
want
irony.
to do.
You and I both know the irony that you trumpet free trade, and that's protectionist. It's a protectionist model that your government trumpets free trade. So can you have your cake and eat it too on that, Mr. O'Toole?
Well, with CETA, you look at the great balance we struck, Evan, which was we did allow more import access for European cheeses, but we've done so at a time where our cheese market's been growing by a vast amount, and over the course of the phase-in of CETA, you'll see our market absorb those new imports, and that we've said we'd keep farmers whole. So we have evolved it, and we've worked with industry on that to open up that new market, but also allow them a transition period where Canadian cheeses
can I just jump in here,
Europe.
Evan? We have actually already heard in the House of Commons from another Conservative MP some comments already about possible compensation to the Canadian agricultural sector as part of TPP. So, you know, there seems to be some wiggle room already in the Conservative position. As I said, we're not at the table in those talks, but it's really essential that Canada be part of this deal.
Let me bring in Mr. Caron. Mr. Caron, where are you on this?
Well, listen, one of the major problems with the TPP right now is the lack of transparency. We know that Canada entered negotiations in the 9th round, I think, having to accept everything that was negotiated before. We still don't know what that is. We know that Canada is not the only country which actually has agricultural protection that the Americans especially wants to dismantle. Japan is standing on the ground right now on the same industry. So. You know, we have a multilateral negotiation right now, and those are always very difficult. So I would say that we shouldn't be looking to promise too much on this, because this will actually be very difficult to conclude. But what I would like to see is what did Canada put on the table, what was already negotiated, and eventually have a little bit more of transparency in the process.
And before I let you go, I got about a minute here. President Putin from Russia was at the APEC summit. Mr. O'Toole, why will he be welcome at the G20 summit in Brisbane later this month? Any contact between the Prime Minister and Mr. Putin after Mr. Harper had said this is the G7+1? Why is he welcome back now?
Well, listen, Evan, I'm not sure how the decisions are made for various leaders, whether it's APEC or G20. Certainly the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, has taken a strong position that when you see aggressive conduct vis-a-vis Russia and the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, they should not be part of international bodies that are actually trying to build dialogue and security at a time where he's showing aggression. So the Prime Minister has been clear through G7 and G20, where Canada has direct influence on not just who's at the talks, but what is being discussed. Mr. Putin shouldn't be at the table while he's taking an approach that actually destabilizes those countries.
Okay, real quick. Mind you, in the end, he did attend, and Mr. Harper also attended. So, Chrystia Freeland, where are you on that?
Look, I think that we have to keep up the pressure on Russia. A very specific, concrete thing I would like to see Canada doing is working closely with France and Germany on stepping up the OSCE monitoring at the border. We saw very strong reports of more Russian tanks coming in over the past few days. We really can't let up, and it's not going to be enough to make rhetorical declarations. We have to be there on the ground doing what we can to support Ukraine.
Mr. Carroll?
Well, agreed. I mean, it's those type of gatherings are very difficult to control, and if you have a last-minute invitee, it might create some problems. On the other side, Canada has made a stand on Russia, especially in the issue of freezing the assets. But we've seen that this government has been very inconsistent in doing so. So, by doing this, we have lost any leverage we could have on diplomatic channel with
doing what?
With Russia, by freezing the assets and going aggressively in the way that our allies have done. On the other side, we have to understand that when there is an opportunity, Canada actually has to hold its ground to Russia, and I hope that was done during the APEC meeting if there was a chance to actually make that point.
So sorry, are you saying you wouldn't have frozen the assets?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that Canada actually has frozen the assets, has gone the way that our allies did, which we supported as well. Now, if there is a meeting, gathering, even if it's unexpected, if you want, there is very little possibility of actually being able to address the situation, because you have basically defined your position in that way. So even if you have an accidental gathering, what was the option that there was? Was it to remove yourself from the APEC meeting, or just go and continue to attend it? And hopefully the Prime Minister was actually able to stand his ground and to be able to reaffirm the Canadian position.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Mr. O'Toole, Ms. Freeland, Mr. Caron, appreciate all your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Evan.
Great to be with you, Evan.
Thank you.